this is Christmas in July because when I saw that Kyle Kulinski invited the Vanguard guys onto his show to talk about Marianne Williamson and Cornel West and the 2024 election, I thought, wow, what a gift from the heavens. So here we go. We're going to play. There's quite a bit of video to play here. We're not going to play the whole thing. The whole thing was 20 minutes. We're going to play like the first 6 minutes or so. We will be stopping at various points. So let's have at it.
Earlier, you mentioned something, Gavin, that I thought was really interesting. You were talking about definitely voting for Marianne.
Okay, I'm going to stop it right here. Take our first pause. I have never seen a political organization take power that uses a sort of pastel teal as its theme color, right? This just exudes weakness. It really does. I'm saying, and this is you may think that that's a trivial comment. Vosh has like the pinkish purple light behind him and stuff like that. Yeah. There's this. What is with this pastel sort of scheme that these guys use? Do you think that reads power? Do you think it reads that you stand for something? There's something so incredibly benign about it. Am I reading too much into it, or am I wrong? Am I wrong? Can anybody name me a political organization that used pastel colors as its theme colors that has actually done anything in the world?
I mean, to be fair, nostalgia is powerful, and Kyle seems to be broadcasting from a green screened backdrop of the Brady Bunch house. So he's got that going for him. You know, people have warm feelings about the Brady Bunch.
Exactly. Seafoam. Exactly.
I don't know. I don't know what they're going for. You don't really want to soothe people, right? I think it's meant to be soothing.
No, yeah, right.
Soothing. You know, you want people riled up,
right? Yeah, it's the MAGA, red, communism, red.
I mean, the Spanish Civil War, wasn't that the revolutionaries? Didn't they go with pastels?
Lavender and teal.
I'm trying to.
You ever see an army in lavender and teal uniforms? No.
I mean, look at Picasso's Guernica, actually. I think they're all in pastels fighting there.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think you've got that wrong. You got to look at your art history.
All right, here we go.
In the Democratic primary, which obviously I fully agree.
Here, I'll start it over.
Earlier, you mentioned something, Gavin, that I thought was really interesting. You were talking about definitely voting for Marianne in the Democratic primary, which obviously I fully agree with. And then you were saying in the general, definitely voting for Cornel West. So the point that I've made on my show, and kind of the point that I've made over the years, even in 2016 and even in 2020, even though some people like interpret what I've said differently, my point has always been, if you live in a safe state, I think you should vote for, you know, the
if your vote is going to have absolutely no consequence.
Right.
If your vote is completely meaningless and gestural to the point that you might as well not even walk down to the polling station except to just feel good about yourself and pat yourself on the back for your empty gesture, then I am all for it. But if your vote is actually going to threaten to actually affect this horrific trap that we're in between the mob boss that wants to break your legs and the mob boss that wants to knock your teeth out, if you actually want to do something about that, you're out of line, my friend.
Right. You have to think about it. Think about it. Hear him out.
I think you should vote for, you know, the Green Party candidate or whichever candidate 100% aligns more with your values. But I actually think it's a much more difficult moral conundrum in a swing state. I actually don't think it's a very easy question. Like, I'm definitely going to vote for Cornel West because at the end of the day, look, it's just the ironclad reality that if we don't get rid of first past the post voting and if we don't implement ranked choice voting, all the third party talk, whether it's a libertarian, green, an independent, or anybody, it's just, it all comes to like it's literally for nothing. It's all just like a fake virtue signal show.
No. As Russell just explained, what you're describing now is the fake virtue signal show. Voting for a green in a safe state is more of a virtue signal show. Obviously, if you want to get them the 5% threshold, there's some efficacy in it, but he doesn't want you doing it in any place where it is a threat to the Democratic Party. In other words, a virtue signal show, right? You're there to show that you disagree with the Democratic platform, but you don't want to hurt them. You don't want to cost them. And it's a virtue signal show unless we implement ranked choice voting. I'm going to explain why he's wrong about that in just a second.
And I actually think that sort of like delegitimizes the idea of a third party and a candidate who's not a Democrat or Republican a lot more, that we all buy into this charade that there might be something serious going on here. Now, this, by the way, is coming from somebody. I voted for Jill Stein.
Oh, beautiful.
As an empty gesture in New York.
As an empty gesture in New York. He's saying now, because he's going to probably be voting in Virginia in 2024, and that is somewhat of a swing state, he is going to vote for Joe Biden. Don't worry, we're going to get back to the Kyle and Vanguard video in just a moment. But I just want to demonstrate something, because he says here that you can't really get behind third-party voting as long as we have a first-past-the-post system and we do not have ranked choice voting. Well, I want you to think about the logic of that, okay? Why would the Democrats or the Republicans give you ranked choice voting if all ranked choice voting would enable and empower people to vote for third parties? We have this problem, right? We have a two-party system. Every state, every county, every district, wherever, is controlled by one of these two major parties. Why would they simply pass ranked choice voting if they thought that by doing so, they would empower and invite people to vote third party? Answer, they would not. That's why very few places have ranked choice voting.
Where's the upside for them?
Right. What's the upside for them? What might actually get you ranked choice voting is if you start voting for third parties now, because then ranked choice voting enables the two major parties to pick up some of those third party votes on the second and third round. I'm going to get a little Katie Porter on you guys now, so bear with me. I have a little bit of a whiteboard presentation, okay? This is the Keaton Weiss whiteboard presentation, okay? Let's say we have an election and the final vote is this. Republicans 48%, Democrats 46%, the Greens have 5%, and the Libertarians have 1%, right? We're trying to get Cornell up around 5 this time. Let's say this is the final count. Republicans, Democrats, Greens, Libertarians. If there's no ranked choice voting, election's over, Republicans win. Because you don't need to cross 50%. It's whoever has the plurality of votes on the first round, because there's only one round. Under ranked choice voting, we would go numerous rounds until one party crosses that 50% majority threshold. And the way we determine who crosses that 50% majority threshold is you eliminate the losing party, the party that's in last place, and you take the second choice of those voters and we put them up to number one, right? So let's just say we have this here. Now we'll say, to be very simplistic, I understand this is not the way it happens. Let's just say, for argument's sake, do the Libertarians get every vote that would be Libertarian goes to the Republican, and every vote that is Green, the second choice, would go to the Democrat, right? We'll assume that all the Libertarian first round votes are Republican on the second round, all the Green votes are Democrat on the second round. I understand that's not exactly how it works, but just for simplicity's sake. So the way this would work is Libertarians...
What about racist Libertarians who like Biden's mass incarceration policy?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. So maybe I'm not accounting for that. But under that, you have Libertarians at 1, so they would get knocked out. They would go to 0, and let's give their point to the Republicans. Republicans are now up 49-46, but no one is at 50 points yet. So you have to go a second round, at which point the Greens go to 0, Democrats get those 5 points, and now, boom, Democrats win, 51-49. So under that situation, where it's Republicans 48, Democrats 46, Greens 5, Libertarians 1, right? You would have a situation where if you did not have ranked choice voting, the election would be over, Republicans would win, Democrats would have a hissy fit that the Greens stole their votes, and the Republicans would take power. If you had ranked choice voting in that situation, the Democrats would win, because the Democrats would be the beneficiaries of those second round Green Party votes. So what you do by voting third party is you incentivize the two major parties to pass ranked choice voting, because now they need access to those second round votes if no party crosses 50%. Under Kyle's method, nothing happens. Kyle just virtue signals, how do you like that he wants ranked choice voting, but he doesn't actually put in place any system that would give you ranked choice voting, because what you're saying is we can't vote third party until the two parties break their monopoly or duopoly by choice and just grant us ranked choice voting. That's what you call a virtue signal. So it's just completely backwards. It's completely backwards. If anything, ranked choice voting can be ushered in by third party movements, because that gives the two major parties an incentive to pass it, right?
Right. Right. Yeah, in the end, they're only going to do it if it benefits them. There's really no upside to allowing it now. It's all the best case scenario. It just embarrasses them by demonstrating how much underlying support there really is for third party. Worst case scenario, if everyone feels like they're not going to throw it to the party that they hate, they can start losing.
Right.
Like, it's totally possible. I could totally see if you took away the spoiler consideration, I could totally see voters, even shit libs who just don't think that's going to happen, being like, I'm going to vote green, and then being horrified that the Greens actually won. Like, that would only work once, but hey, man, it could happen.
Could happen. Anyway, let's go back to Kyle now explaining the case for why you should vote for Joe Biden in a swing state. So this is the part that got a lot of eyeballs on it. And so we will take this little by little.
So when it comes to Biden, I got to be honest with you guys. I expected Dickie McGee's Ex from him. I expected literally nothing because we're talking about
Hasn't anyone talked to him about this catchphrase?
I guess
not. Does
not.
he have no one in his life who cares enough about him to tell him to stop doing this to his hair and stop saying Dickie McGee's Ex? Nobody loves him enough to tell him this?
Dickie McGee's Ex. I was expecting Dickie McGee's Ex from Joe Biden. Let's see what he got.
Who voted for the Iraq War. We're talking about a guy who voted for the crime bill and wrote part of the crime bill. We're talking about a guy who supported NAFTA and the Patriot Act. And like his record as a senator is a deeply, deeply conservative Democrat and a corrupt Democrat. So I expected nothing at all. But then when he got into office, like, I was genuinely pleasantly surprised to see he did some student loan debt reduction. He did.
No, he didn't. He did not do student loan debt reduction.
He did enforcement of the laws on the books that had been ignored, which is exactly what he's doing now, and calling it loan forgiveness.
Right. The loan forgiveness that he took was struck down by the Supreme Court, which I strongly suspect was by design, because he ignored a memo telling him to invoke the Higher Education Act of 1965 and use that as the basis for his for his student debt action. He took, what was it, 16 months, 14 months? I forget the exact time, from April to July, whatever that is. 16 months, 14 months, whatever the math is, to decide to actually cancel student debt. But he used the wrong justification, and that just got struck down. And now he's going to say...
Why would you? Why would you? They already knew that the Supreme Court had been very skeptical of their economic relief policies with COVID as a justification. They didn't even uphold eviction moratorium as justified in a fucking pandemic. They're going to think that student loan forgiveness is predicated on a pandemic. That's going to pass muster at a court that struck down an eviction moratorium. They knew. They did not want this to pass. They get too much money from loan servicers, from credit card companies, and from banks to actually do student loan forgiveness.
Of course. And that student loan forgiveness, the actual student loan forgiveness, was just struck down, and we're not getting a new student loan forgiveness executive action until after the next election, because he says it's going to take longer to do it under the Higher Education Act than to do it under the HEROES Act. This last thing that he just passed, we did a whole segment on it. First of all, you need a master's degree to figure out how the fucking thing works. That's number one. Number two, not only is it means tested, it's age tested, because it only kicks in after 20 to 25 years of payments that are income based payments. So what that means is, if you can't pay back your balance after 25 years based on an income-based repayment plan, what it means is they're going to soak poor people for 25 years and then forgive the debt past that point. Because if you're paying on an income basis and that degree you got was worth anything, you shouldn't need the student debt relief at the end, because you should be able to pay it back in 25 years. But you can't, because they rake you over the coals in this country. So that's the version of relief that he has passed. It affects very, very few people as compared to the actual student debt package. And the actual student debt package was a failure by design. So no, he gets 0 points for canceling student debt. 0 for 1. Anything to add before we go on?
Yeah, it's not even something he passed. This is just that the system is so broken that a lot of student loan debt should have been forgiven under the law.
People
and
were overcharged.
Yeah, people. He's been moving people through the system who should have had their loans forgiven already for public service, and this, they just didn't do it. He's just been fixing bureaucratic snafus. There's another case of it.
Right. All right, here we go.
$1,400 stimulus checks. He said it was going to be $2,000. That was a lie, but we got $1,400, which was half decent.
Trump wanted to give more, right? Trump wanted to give higher checks during the lame duck session. He didn't. So again, this is all under the premise. He's making the argument here that not only did Joe Biden,
she held it up.
Right. He's making the argument that not only has Joe Biden exceeded expectations, but as we will get to in a few moments, that he is the lesser evil to Donald Trump. Okay, well, Trump wanted to give more than the $2,000. Biden nickel and dimed you for $1,400. So that's over 2.
In the Inflation Reduction Act, they overruled the Supreme Court because the Supreme Court said the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, is not allowed to do environmental protection. And so Biden and the Democrats slipped it into the IRA that we're redefining carbon emissions as a pollutant. So now the EPA can regulate it again, basically saving the entire fight against climate change by that one simple procedural trick, which was super based, one of the most base things I've ever seen any Democrat in the modern era do.
Super based, saving the entire fight against climate change with that one act. Not only did this guy sign the Willow Project, which is the biggest drilling permit in the history of federal lands, but one thing that he doesn't get enough shit for from a climate change standpoint is the destruction of the Nord Stream pipeline, which was the biggest carbon bomb in human history. No single act.
The Russians did it.
No single act in the history of the world, no man-made act, has released more carbon into the atmosphere than blowing up that pipeline, which Joe Biden is on record saying will be destroyed if Russia invades Ukraine. Gave a little smirk when they asked, how can that happen? Right? Now, trust me, we have a way of doing it. Then they said Russia did it. Then we said we don't know who did it. Then they said the Ukrainians did it, but the Ukrainians didn't tell their government that they were doing it, and we didn't know they did it. Then we have information that the U.S. learned that the Ukrainians were going to do it. We did it. He did it. Okay? He did it. So between the Willow Project and that, you're talking about a disastrous environmental record. But he doesn't mention any of that. He mentioned some bureaucratic step that they took that apparently has solved the climate change problem, right? Basically, what did he say?
Yeah.
He's basically saved the fight against climate change. He's basically saved it, right?
We're redefining carbon emissions as a pollutant. So now the EPA can regulate it again, basically saving the entire fight against climate change by that one simple procedural trick, which was super base, one of the most base things I've ever seen any Democrat in the modern era do.
That's the best.
He raised the minimum wage for federal employees and federal contractors through executive order, which is about 400,000 workers to $15 an hour. I definitely didn't expect him to do that. I didn't expect him to do project.
Raise the minimum wage for government workers. Okay.
Labor agreements, which 200,000 union workers get higher wages as a result of that. I didn't expect him to onshore 200,000 jobs.
Not only did he break a railroad strike, but we'll see what happens with this UPS strike because he's under a lot of pressure to intervene on management's behalf over that. We'll see what happens. That's still 8 days away, 9 days away, but we will see. We will see what happens with that.
Order your microwave popcorn now.
When Trump had offshored hundreds of thousands of jobs. I didn't expect him to do even the mild gun reform that he did, where we have like some funding for red flag laws and we got rid of the boyfriend loophole. So if you have like a domestic abuser boyfriend.
The boyfriend loophole, that's the name of Crystal's memoir coming out in about 25 years. The boyfriend loophole. Glad you got that plug in there. Good business. Good for the family business. Go ahead. No, I was going to say those things where he's talking about the increased wages for union members, $15 minimum wage for federal workers, and things like that. This is all part of the Democrat grift, is to orient themselves slightly to the left of Republicans on certain issues, precisely so that people can come on the air and make these kinds of arguments for them every 4 years when it comes time to vote for them. Right? So it's not that they are to the right of Republicans on everything. They orient themselves ever so slightly to their left on a small handful of issues so that the sheepdogs can go to work convincing progressives and lefties that they're better off voting Democrat.
Hey, look, I know we were a little rough on you, but, you better pay because you know what the other guy's going to do to you, right?
Right, exactly. That's part of the grift. That's part of the shakedown, right? is giving you that little tiny bit extra, right? On a handful of issues.
And this is probably going to come up a lot in this segment. I don't know why, at this point, why do channels like this exist? Like, who's that for? Who is Kyle for? And we will see. I don't think there are enough shit libs for all these newly minted shit libs to go around. I think they are turning their back on the base audience that they had and the audience that they're going for. They have CNN, they have MSNBC, man. And if they really want to go in this direction, they have the Young Turks, right? Like, why are they going to watch Kyle?
Well, not anymore. Maybe he sees an opportunity to.
Maybe he's trying to get some Young Turks.
Exactly.
Trans the children fanatics. Maybe that's the niche they're going for. I'll be interested to see how this plays out, because watching this whole segment, I mean, he sounded like any commentator on corporate media. So, like, why are you going to watch somebody on a bad set with dumb takes give you the same takes you could get on a better produced show on your TV? Like, why? I don't know who the audience is for this. I don't get it.
Yeah, well, we'll keep going.
That you can legally take their guns now if they're a threat. I didn't expect, Ketanji Brown Jackson, I think, is a great Supreme Court justice. She was put on the court.
Okay, well, a justice retired, and he was going to appoint a liberal to the court. Sure. I mean, Jackson's fine. What? That's something that any other Democrat wouldn't have also done?
Right.
Like, how does that exceed expectations is what I would ask. Like, he's talking about how he exceeded my expectation. Right. He appointed a liberal to the court, which any Democrat would do. Right.
We have the NLRB is genuinely pro-labor. We wouldn't have seen this increase in Amazon unionization and Starbucks unionization if it wasn't for that. He pulled out of Afghanistan, which I thought was super based, and then he actually told the media to suck his nuts as he did it when they were, like, flipping out over it. And he took a hit in the polls as a result of it, because they hit him so fucking hard on that.
He took a hit in the polls because he fucking stumbled out of Afghanistan like a fucking drunk at 4 a.m.
Right, exactly. You had Afghanis dangling off the side of the airplane as the planes were flying. You literally had people falling out of the sky during that Afghanistan pullout. It was an absolute catastrophe the way it was executed. That was the turning point in terms of his poll numbers. He was above 50%. When that happened, he plummeted to the low 40s. He has never recovered, because that pullout of Afghanistan was his 47% moment, right? When we remember in the 2012 campaign, when Mitt Romney was caught on a hot mic saying 47% of the country are lazy and they're never going to take care of themselves, right? We just have to not worry about them. That confirmed everyone's deepest fears about Mitt Romney, which was that he was an out-of-touch, rich prick.
Right.
And what the Afghanistan pullout did was the exact same thing to Joe Biden. It confirmed people's deepest fears that this guy was not up for the job, because a week before the Afghanistan pullout, he's on camera staring into space saying, yeah, no, we feel really good about how it's going to happen. Yeah, we're pretty confident. We don't think the Taliban will necessarily regain power.
Those people hanging from the helicopters, that's a Kabul production of Miss Saigon.
Right. So when you're on camera, I don't know if it was a week before, this was a couple years ago, but a month before, whatever it was, just staring into space, mumbling about how you're confident that the pullout's going to be fine, and then it goes down like that, that confirms what everybody suspected, which is that you're not up for the job, right? Yes, Mika, 1,000 in the chat. Thank you very much. Please hit that like button. Please hit that subscribe button for those of you who are here. Thank you very much for being here. We appreciate that. But he says, okay, he was super based for pulling out of Afghanistan, super based for telling the media to suck his nuts. But then he goes on to give the caveat immediately after.
And he went down in the polls, but he pulled out and said, no, I'm not going to go back in. Now, we can talk about all the, the negative things, like he's
starving the people of Afghanistan with sanctions?
Starving Afghanistan right now via sanctions.
That's right. That's
starving schmarving.
I called it. Right. I knew you were going to say that. How'd I know? Had I know. I got it working. Got the mojo working.
You know, he did a drone strike that killed innocents on the way out of Afghanistan.
Forgot about that.
And so I could do the whole spiel. Like, here's the 20 areas where he's wrong. Ripped up the Iran agreement, is not getting back into it. You know, it didn't lift a finger for the public option or the PRO Act. Gave up on $15 minimum wage for the whole country. Bombed Syria.
Incarcerated two generations of black and brown people sexually assaulted and aged. You know, I could get into all that. I worked with segregationists, opened his campaign waxing nostalgic about how much he used to get done with those segregationists, promised that nothing would fundamentally change. You know, I could go on.
I can go on.
Has us on the verge of World War III.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Notice nowhere in that analysis at all was any mention of the Russia-Ukraine war. Zero. We're going to come back to that in a few minutes.
$15 corporate minimum wage, billions of dollars for Made in America green jobs, which was part of the IRA, the PACT Act, which gave health care to toxic burn pit victims who are veterans, massively reducing the drone war. And he did all this stuff without a fucking supermajority. Obama had a supermajority, and he did like 40% of what Biden was able to do. So I look at that and I go, my purity test in 2020 was like, if I was convinced Joe Biden would just do a couple of the things that I support, just like one or two or maybe three at most, just like if I thought for sure he's going to get me victories on some three things I like, then I would suck it up and vote for him. And my point back then was, I don't think he's going to fucking do it.
Okay. I mean, this just also shows a lack of serious. It shows what gamesmanship is involved, right? It just shows
he's contradicting himself. He said, well, it's not a swing state. You would have voted for Stein anyway, right? In New York. You were in New York. There were no stakes. There were no stakes to it. Like he's making it as if this was something he wrestled with and decided with his conscience.
Well, that's
no,
true.
I can't vote for Joe Biden. But now I realize how much better he is. And you're saying right here, you lived in New York before, and you're not going to be in New York now.
Right. That's true. I didn't think of that. He did say at the beginning of this, well, in New York, of course, you vote green anyway, right? No matter what. You vote for who is better. And now he's saying, well, if you would have named three things, I'd have voted for you in New York.
Based on his whole career as a senator, I don't think he's going to do it. I think he's super goddamn conservative. But then now I look at it and I go, number one, I actually probably should have voted for him. I didn't. I actually didn't vote in 2020, but I kind of should have voted for him, number one. Number two.
Why? I've never seen a person regret not having voted for Joe Biden. Like, who? And in this space, you're actually going to say, I didn't vote for him, but on retrospect, I wish I did? Why? You lived in New York, Kyle. Wouldn't that have just been a virtue signal? Wouldn't that have been a meaningless virtue signal? Because that's what we're all supposed to think.
It's funny because I think anybody who's left the corporate media matrix, one of the things you start to notice after you take the red pill is how they all have the same narrative at the same time, almost like somebody made a phone call. And it's not that somebody made a phone call. It's that all it takes is one of the outlets they follow to publish a hot take, and then they all copy it, right? So if it's on the op-ed page of the Washington Post, the New York Times, Boston Globe, whatever, they'll all imitate it. It's funny to see alternative media doing this because this is the same exact take Ryan Grimm was pushing last week, right? The regretful Jill Stein voters, the people who now wish they voted for Joe Biden. Who are these fucking people? Who are they? Where are they? In the Ryan Grimm piece,
I could see if you're a really just insecure person. I can understand how a person would regret having voted for Stein against Clinton if they are lib adjacent because Clinton actually lost the election, right? So I could. It is conceivable to me that a person would be like, I think they're nuts, but I could at least buy that. Who regrets not voting for Biden? He won. It's not like you changed the outcome.
Who are these people?
How do you look back and say,
I
wish I had voiced my support?
Yeah, we dug into the Ryan Grimm piece. He had to find some fucking random blogger, and she didn't even say that.
Right.
She was thinking about it.
She's like, maybe I should have. Yeah,
maybe I should have.
Maybe
I shouldn't have. I don't know.
Just had nothing else to blog about
today.
Please
subscribe.
Exactly.
If it comes down to Trump versus Biden or DeSantis versus Biden, and I'm in Virginia, I think I would go cast a vote for Biden because for all the issues he has far surpassed my expectations. But now it complicates it even more because Cornel West is running, and I fucking love Cornel West, and he's way more in alignment with my politics. So if I was in New York, I probably would still vote for Cornel West and not for Biden. So anyway, tell me your thing.
I mean, look, I don't want to nitpick too much because I understand you're on a microphone, and you don't control every single word with the precise accuracy that you wanted to. If people nitpick me like that, I would be, have my head, caked in shit as well. But what do you mean you'd probably vote for Cornel in New York? Shouldn't you definitely vote? I mean, if you're in a safe state and Cornel West is on the ballot against Joe Biden, not probably, right? I mean, I won't go too hard on you. I understand. All right. Give you a pass on that one.
And why you're more or less convinced that it's the right thing to do to go Cornel West.
All right, gotcha. A lot to respond there.
Yeah, sorry about that spiel.
All right, now he tosses to the brains of the panel. The brains of the panel here, right? It's true. I'm not lying. He is the brains of the panel.
That's a great freeze frame.
Exactly. All right, here we go.
No, you're great. That's a lot of good stuff. So first of all, I do live in a safe state. I live in Missouri, which is 100% going to go red. It does every year, at least, during my lifetime. At one point, not so much. But now it is, solidly red state. Joe Biden's not going to win it. In my opinion, it's going to go to the Republicans no matter who I vote for. So I'm going to vote for Cornel West in the general election, despite acknowledging, and I think it is important for us lefties to acknowledge that, yes, Joe Biden is the lesser of two evils, and I would much rather him be president again than Donald Trump be president again. I think it's a huge red flag of a faux populist when you start hearing people like Jimmy Dore making the argument that actually Trump is the lesser of two evils.
Boy.
Yeah, that is literally
less of a fascist.
Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Now things are going to start to get interesting. Says, of course, Joe Biden is the lesser evil. It's laughable when you hear fake populists like Jimmy Dore talk about Trump being the lesser evil. Let's hear Kyle's response to that.
Just to be clear, that is of all the things he said, that is by far and away the dumbest shit I've ever heard him say. And for Sam Cedar to chime in and say, I'll debate him, I was watching that like, if he doesn't want to do it, I'll fucking do it. I'll do it.
Please do.
Please do.
Please. Yes. Please, Jesus, God, make that happen.
I would love to see that. I would honestly love to see that happen. That would be quite amazing. So, yes, I hope we can make this happen.
I am going to call the Make-A-Wish Foundation and have them reach out on my behalf. I'm going to tell them I've only got 3 weeks left.
Exactly. All right, now let's hear this. This is my favorite part.
And for Sam Cedar to chime in and say, I'll debate him, I was watching that like, if he doesn't want to do it, I'll fucking do it. I'll do it. Because that shit is, are you, like, do you have any brain cells left to make that argument? Like, that's the thing I don't like. He's a narrative humper, and he's a terminal contrarian. So he has his narrative, which is like, actually, Democrats are the bigger evil. And it's like, if you follow the news at all in modern day, you would know for sure that it's factually false. Or you do know that, and you're lying because you're...
Let me play that one more time.
Actually, Democrats are the bigger evil. And it's like, if you follow the news at all in modern day, you would know for sure that it's factually false.
If you follow the news at all in modern day, you would know that that is factually false. Well, if you follow the news at all in modern day, you would know that there's a war going on in Europe right now.
They never
that
say
has
the,
the potential
in this whole
to
segment.
go global and nuclear. And in that whole 7-minute spiel you just went on, you did not utter a single word about that. A war that Joe Biden and NATO helped provoke by egging on Ukraine to join NATO. And now that it has started, Joe Biden at every turn has helped escalate that war, including destroying the Nord Stream pipeline, which, to speak to your other point, the greatest carbon bomb in the history of the world. If you follow the news at all, you would know that. But you wouldn't necessarily know that if your version of news is the Kyle Kulinski Secular Talk YouTube channel. Let's see how much interest Kyle has shown in this issue, right? He does a news and politics show. You'd think he'd have something to say about the defining issue of our time, which is World War III, which his president, the so-called lesser evil, has egged on at every chance. Let's peruse the catalog.
You would never know it to listen to Kyle or any of the shows.
Where's the Ukraine content? Where?
Yeah.
Where?
Yeah.
Here, we have Marjorie Taylor Greene holding up a dick pic. Donald Trump, Steve Bannon, Elon Musk, Sean Hannity, Ron DeSantis, George Santos. Where? Ron Perlman.
Yeah.
Where are the Ukraine segments here? Where? I don't see anything.
Or the East Palestine segments.
Or the East Palestine.
Or the Union segments.
Right. Or the censorship segments. Where?
Oh, censorship. Forget about it. Wait,
Right.
was it? Wasn't RFK?
Jonah Hill.
Didn't RFK just get dragged in front of that committee?
Yeah, no. Nothing to say about that. A fake left-wing account. I'm honestly looking for a Ukraine segment. This is now 3 weeks. We're now 3 weeks back in the timeline. I don't see a single thing. Not a single segment. This guy does this for a living. Does a news and politics channel for a living. Every day. Comments on this. Where? Where is it? We're going back. Now we're
Alex Jones. playing the oldies.
We're 1 month back now. Oh, here it is. Coup attempt in Russia. Oh, yeah. This was the thing that he actually reported Western propaganda that there was a coup attempt in Russia, which ended up being totally wrong. Okay, so that was 4 weeks ago. 4 weeks ago. And that's not even really a Ukraine segment. I mean, he was responding to breaking news.
Right.
When was the last critical take on Ukraine? Now we're a month. Over a month. Where? I don't see it. Anyway, you get the point. You get the
Jane,
point.
you ignorant
If you're
slut.
following the news at all, you would know that Biden is the lesser evil. Completely ignoring perhaps the most consequential issue of any of our lifetimes.
Well,
That is completely absent from his calculation. That he says, that's the dumbest shit I've ever heard Jimmy Dore say, that Donald Trump is the lesser evil. Oh, you mean the guy who promised to end the war in 24 hours is not the lesser evil to the guy who has egged this war on at every turn and could get half the global population nuked over it? I mean, it's one thing, like, if you want to acknowledge that but still say despite that, you think Biden is a lesser evil? Good luck making that argument. I don't think it's a very good argument, but you could try to make it. He does not even mention World War III in any of that. He went on for 7 fucking minutes, not a single mention of the most important consequential issue of our time. And you go, well, if you follow the news, you'll know that Biden's the lesser evil. I mean, what fucking ignorant nonsense. For a guy who does this every day for a living, so-called progressive commentator.
Well, that's where I'm very confused by the whole segment. Does he actually believe the things he's saying? You can only justify this perspective by completely ignoring Ukraine. And most of them do for that reason. Because once you get into that, who is better? The person who says, yeah, I'm gonna end this war as soon as I get into office, or the person who wants to escalate this weekly? Every week, something we said we weren't going to do, we're doing. Now we're sending them cluster bombs. Now we're training them on F-16s. Now we've signed off on other countries providing them F-16s. Now we found out we have 1,000 boots on the ground? We have 1,000 boots on the ground there. So if you take on that reality, how do you justify this is just crazy? This is just crazy. They have to make it out that it's crazy by focusing only on culture. And yes, economics. Are Democrats marginally better? I mean, the evidence on the ground, it does not really play out that way. Like, will they go as out of their way to interfere with union drives as the Republicans will? Not as a rule, but the overall effect of their lack of support and the fact that if shit gets real, as it did in the railroad strike, they'll do what the Republicans would do anyway. What does it add up to? In the end, you end up in the same place.
No, they give tiny crumbs as political bribes in order to empower and enable progressive commentators and progressive media to go out and make exactly the case that he just made, which is that, see, here, now you have a more labor-friendly counsel on the NLRB board than you would under Trump. So there, what are you going to say about that? What are you going to say about that?
Right.
How is he not less reasonable on that?
And that's as far as it goes. And in the end, it doesn't really do very much for the average person. Exactly. It's enough crumbs for them to make some kind of a distinction without very much of a difference. But that really explains the scroll that you just did. The reason Ukraine is not there is that they don't want to be in a position where they have to make a case for it. Some of them will make a full-throated case for it, like TYT. They will just go ahead and make a full-throated case for it. I think there are a lot of people who maybe are more conscious or feel more that that's a contradiction of being left, so they just avoid the topic entirely. Because if you don't avoid the topic entirely, how can you make the statement he just made there? You're actually in a world of complexity. So this is where it's confusing to me. I mean, Kyle has become a full-blown just shill. I mean, he's just a shill. I don't watch Breaking Points as much as I used to, but when I've seen Crystal do her radars and her monologues, she's certainly tainted by her association with Marianne. But I've never seen her go this full-on, just batshit crazy, absurd, stupid, full-on Biden support. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong in the chat. I have not seen her drop that kind of a formulation. Maybe she has, like I said. I don't
give it time. I mean, we're still.
Oh,
early.
I could definitely see her getting there, but I'm just a little surprised at just this take being the only difference between this and your standard CNN take is, the idea of playing footsie with third parties in safe states. Other than that, this is a CNN take. So I just don't understand what you're doing in an alternative media space. And more to the point, I don't understand who would want to watch that. Like, if you want that, just turn on CNN.
Right. No, exactly. And on the Jimmy Dore challenge, I will just say, obviously, it's up to him. It's up to them. I personally, as an audience member, would love to see it.
I would. Okay, so there are a couple things you didn't clip that were kind of interesting. And this is, we're not giving the Vanguard boys their due. We're not showing their best moments. So Zach actually had a very interesting moment that Kyle immediatile shut down. He shut it down.
You're proud of your boy. He made you proud.
He made me proud. He's got a little of the old man in him. Kyle shut that down so fast. I got to wonder if he's getting paid by the CIA at this point. So Zach actually, because they talked a little about Ross Perot. He was coming up. They talked a little about Jesse Ventura. And Zach says that would be amazing if Cornel West did as well as Ross Perot. That would just be great. And that's not on script. That doesn't fit the narrative that Kyle is laying out. Kyle immediately shut that down. No, they would just demonize him. And, so they're the Vanguard dealing with this, famous, longtime YouTuber. So immediately they just bow their head. Yeah, no, you're right. They would just demonize him. But what the fuck does that even mean? Of course they would demonize him. That's not a bug. That's a feature. That's right, the fucking point.
That's the point. That's the whole point.
You're going to make their fucking heads explode if he did what Ross Perot do.
18 and a half, 19 something.
We could only drink. But Kyle immediately goes to making that a negative thing because they're gonna be mad at him. Like, it didn't even make any fucking sense. It made no sense. And then later on, this was the dumbest thing that Kyle said in this entire segment. This was towards the end of the clip. I think they asked him if they thought that Cornel could win in the primaries. I think he was responding to a question they asked. And he says, with a straight face, with all seriousness, he says, yes, well, I think he could have won the Democratic primaries. Sure, don't get me wrong. They're gonna do shenanigans and they put their thumb on the scale. But look at Bernie. He got 45%. Exactly, you fucking moron. Look at Bernie.
Oh, well, that was another point that we really should have got into also, where he says, well, Jill Stein only got like 3% in 2016. Bernie got 45%. Yeah, he got 45% of the scrimmage match vote. Those are apples and oranges. You're comparing two different contests. Bernie Sanders got 0. I mean, there were some people who wrote him in, obviously, but he got effectively 0 in 2016. Jill Stein got 3. Bernie scored 45 in the scrimmage match to determine who got to take place in the actual election. So you're comparing two completely different processes. That's like saying the worst basketball team in the league is better than the best baseball team in the league because the basketball team scores more points. Well, yeah, of course you're going to score more points in basketball, where you average 85 points a game, than in baseball, where you average 4 runs a game. It's a completely different competition.
Right.
Bernie got more. Bernie got 45%. He got 45% in a rigged process that was then out of the way and over with and made no difference whatsoever in the final vote count in November. Jill Stein was on the ballot in November. So, of course, she was more consequential in 2016 than Bernie Sanders in terms of the final vote count. So what are you talking about?
Right. He is not talking about the fact that in the end, you don't get to vote for Bernie Sanders.
Right.
He's not talking about the fact he's trying to minimize it. Yeah, they put the thumb on the scale. He's trying to make it like it's still winnable, that it's not just so rigged that they would never let somebody like Cornell win. He's not even, and I'm okay, fine. He's not even getting into the fact that not in a million years would the people who show up to vote in a Democratic primary, even without rigging, nominate Cornell West. That would never, against a sitting president.
It's a sitting president, right.
Never, ever, ever happen. They wouldn't need to rig it. There would be no shenanigans. But you're a, 12-year political commentator? And this is the fucking nonsense you're telling your audience? That you think if Cornell West ran, he could actually win in a Democratic primary? And you're also tacitly implying that even though the Democrats might do some dirty tricks, in the end, it's an essentially fair process.
Right, exactly.
Where an outsider could actually win? You're telling your audience that?
Well, because once you shatter that illusion, then there's no rationale for your Mary Anns or your pet candidates.
That is what really struck me, that he has to present this theory of the case, because otherwise, what are you doing with Marianne? Like everything goes back to Marianne with these two. Ultimately, everything's about trying to. At this point, I don't even think trying to protect Marianne. I think protect themselves. They're trying to save face, because at this point, if you look at the classic crystal ball eye roll in that monologue that we covered, they know they got egg on their face. Oh, yeah. They know that they stuck their necks out and embarrassed themselves. And lost a lot of credibility as political commentators. So now they're just trying to shore up the idea that there was some sense to this doomed campaign, that God knows how many of their people they got to waste time, and I hope not a lot, money on that fucking shell game of a campaign that they promoted. But also he says at one point, look at how many more people would be hearing Cornell now if he were running as a Democrat. And I think, no, that's not the best part. He says, and then he'd be able to force a debate. Asshole, your fucking Topanga Canyon guru there did do all of this. Do you see a debate forthcoming? RFK, who's polling a lot better than your candidate.
Yeah.
He's not forcing a debate. They are not giving you a debate. They wouldn't give you a debate if you were leading in the polls.
Right. No, exactly.
You understand? Right. This is what I don't get. Are you this ignorant? Are you this dishonest? I did that whole video showing how he got in front of a camera and just completely lied about what was in the Political article about Marianne, and that's why he didn't put it on screen. Because what he was saying it said was not what it said. So the whole thing, and if you watch alternative media, anyone who covers an article puts it up on screen, right? So you can go back, you can look at that breakdown. So he is willing to go on camera, look into it, and just straight out lie to his audience. So you look at all this, and you just, I don't know him personally. We don't know him personally, but you have to walk away and say, is he this fundamentally clueless after going through the 2 Sanders campaigns and all the years he's covering politics? Or has he just become just so fundamentally dishonest that he has just thrown any consideration for his audience and the people who trust him completely out the window in favor of whatever grift he thinks he's running here? I don't know which it is, honestly. It's one or the other.
Please clap.